Hello, this is Link on Air. Sorry that I haven't made a review in ages for those of you who care. College and work interfere quite a bit with the time I can spend working on this stuff, but my classes are finally slowing down and my next semester looks like it will be less hindering. So I thought to kick things off I'd review Assassin's Creed. All of them. Except for the handheld titles. Well, maybe Liberation if you guys want me to, since it's getting a PC release and all. So on with the review. First up, the story, and let me start by saying that any significant spoilers will not be mentioned until the next review. Seems reasonable enough. That said, you play as Desmond Miles, a bartender in the year 2012 who is being forced by scientists to relive the memories of his ancestor, Altair. And in this title, Desmond doesn't really contribute a lot to the story, so I'll just leave it at that. The real meat of the story revolves around his ancestor Altair, an assassin in the 12th century Holy Land that has been brought down by his arrogance and must regain his status and the respect of his brotherhood by completing 9 assassinations of men who have had their hands in the Third Crusade. I'm just gonna say that this is probably one of my favorite stories in the Assassin's Creed franchise. Altair has a pretty strong character arc despite his rather bland delivery, and his interactions with his plot-important assassin friends are interesting. Though the story, or rather the storytelling, isn't without issue, such as how you're able to move around while having dialogues with another character, which in combination with the camera angles available can be quite distracting. Well, that and Altair talking with an American accent. Is there a reason Altair has an American accent? Hold on. Ah, I see. Oh, it was out of laziness or something. Well, at least it wasn't bad voice acting. On the gameplay side of things, Assassin's Creed's focus has always been on creating an open world in which every building that looked climbable was climbable. Usually. When it came to the free running and climbing, I ran into a few instances in which my character would refuse to grab certain ledges, though I imagine this was due to some of the ledges not being made grabbable because they were overlooked or something, which, given the scale of the game, I can hardly complain about. Now obviously, this being an assassin game, there is stealth. Much like the Hitman games, stealth is less about hiding in the shadows and more of the hiding in plain sight deal, which works reasonably well. However, the guards in Assassin's Creed can be set off by even the slightest provocation, which can be infuriating. For example, I was walking slowly towards my assassination target to keep his awareness down, only to be shoved by a drunk, causing every guard in the area and my target to automatically assume I was an assassin, and proceeded to pummel me to death. To make matters worse, as the game progresses, the guards become even easier to set off. You can't bump into people, run, or get shoved by a drunk unless you want an entire army chasing you down. The game does provide means of which to hide from guards, in bales of hay or by sitting on benches, but this can be difficult as no matter how many sharp turns you take, or say you climb on the roof, the guards will always know which way you went. Perhaps this is just another thing that was overlooked, but the issue can get really annoying after a while. The game also has a combat system, which, admittedly, I'd say is one of the better combat systems in the series, as well as one of the more challenging. And let me preemptively say that, unlike future installments in the series, the combat is far more than just push counter to win, though that is a viable tactic early on. But you'll quickly want to learn the ins and outs of the combat in this game if you don't want to have a difficult time later on. You have to pay careful attention to all of your enemies, notice when they lower their guards, break through their defense with well-timed attacks, while making sure none of them blindside you while you're trying to kill one of their friends. It's incredibly tense and exciting. Before moving on, I've got one last complaint about the gameplay: the kingdom. The area between the cities of Acre, Damascus, and Jerusalem. It's almost completely pointless. It's just padding. Very nice looking padding that still holds up fairly well to this day, but padding no less. Fortunately, a fast travel system is unlocked after the completion of one assassination in each city. Yes, I'm ignoring the repetitive missions that take place before the assassination missions because they never really bothered me at all much, and when it first came out, and even less so with the increased variation of the PC version I purchased later on. So, on to graphics and the soundtrack. Now, the visuals of this game focus on realism, like many games do these days, and despite it coming out around 6 years ago, it holds up surprisingly well. Great even. The buildings are designed accurately to the setting as far as I know, but seeing how history isn't a strong topic of mine, I won't get into it. If I have any issue with Assassin's Creed's visuals, it's Lucy's character model. It looks awful. Just about every character model in the game looks really good, or at least decent. Perhaps her inclusion was last minute. Expect this issue to come up in future reviews as well, though not as bad. I know it's a petty complaint, but it just bugs the hell out of me. Now, I'm going to leave the soundtrack to the musical monocle. He's far more qualified to talk about it than me. Have at it.
Hey, Musical Monocle here. The first Assassin's Creed game arrived at a unique time in the video game industry. The combination of sandbox and cinematic elements in gaming was beginning to mature, and as a result, composers had the challenge of portraying vast and changing atmospheres in a fluid manner, all while incorporating a modern level of depth. As a result, players might have found the music of the first title to be a bit lacking, perhaps thinking of it more as ambiance, and certainly not something that you could easily recall well enough to hum along hours after playing. However, if you take the time to appreciate the objectives of the composer, you may find that the score was actually pretty well thought out. You can go from the Christian-occupied to the Muslim-occupied cities, and the musical elements in effect reflect this seamlessly, and all without interrupting the flow of the game. So essentially, it mostly is ambiance, influenced by a regional history as well as the overarching science fiction awareness present in an unobtrusive way. Am I saying that there's no room for improvement? No. I would say that the later titles gained a lot by taking the risk of showing out a little, and by strengthening the musical motifs to the point that they were more memorable. Back to you, Link on Air.
So, now that I've covered everything, I'd have to give this game a 6 out of 10. The visuals have held up really well over the last 6 years, and the gameplay overall is incredibly solid. But because of a few minor issues, it falls just shy of greatness. I'd give it a recommendation to buy, to see if you like it, given the price is around $20 new on PC, and even less on consoles if you get it used. I, for one, love this game, and I hope you do as well. If you enjoyed this review, like and subscribe. If you have any game recommendations, leave them in the comments. As far as reviews go, I will primarily be sticking to PC. The next review out will most likely be Assassin's Creed 2, assuming nothing interferes with my schedule. This has been Link on Air. Have a nice day, or night, whichever's more accurate.
I envy you, Altair. Well, not the bit where you were beaten and stripped of your rank, but I envy everything else. Oh, except for the terrible things the other assassins say about you. But yes, aside from the failure and the hatred, yes, aside from those things, I envy you very much.